Thanks, Wendy and ODI. Thanks, Samir, Paul, everyone for being here and being online and making this meeting possible. I did not do a PowerPoint presentation. Rather, what I'll do is share some of the reflections and the main ideas and perhaps themes that came from this research. And it is very difficult to kind of pull together and synthesize the richness of the experience that we had in Pakistan. This research was undertaken in December by myself and Andy Featherstone, who I hope is joining us online, who is in Pakistan now. And that was after the April 2009 military insurgency and the IDP crisis in Pakistan, where I think 1.9 million IDPs, that resulted in 1.9 million IDPs. In terms of where the humanitarian community was at the moment, that was, I think, right after the first cluster evaluation, and we were approaching the second cluster evaluation. And there were a lot of questions about the effectiveness of the humanitarian response. But then we, as ActionAid, we felt there was something missing here. There was the whole evaluation discourse and drive was getting too mechanical, and we thought, all right, let's go and ask people about what they think of the humanitarian project, which became a nagging question for us in the unit I work in. And obviously from Wendy's introduction, you've all gathered that I'm an imposter and a newcomer to humanitarianism, so I just have to own this. But it's become a really nagging concern. So the journey of this research took us to perceptions of humanitarian assistance and the legitimacy and relevance of the humanitarian project, and to what extent really does it offer a truly global and universal language that can bind us together. Obviously, the first thing apparent was, and I don't think it comes as a surprise to anyone, was the Western look and feel of humanitarian assistance and its strong association with the Western hegemony. Interestingly, the kind of the map, the psychological map is America, this total hegemonic thing called America, and Saudi is somewhere there, Saudi Arabia, America, the rest of the world, and India. That is the psychological map when we ask people, and I come from these communities and I know where I come from. That is the psychological map. Where does aid come from? Aid comes from America, boom. And that is across the board, across social strata, across education. NGO workers, it's a bit different, but with aid recipients, the clients of the humanitarianism, aid comes from America. Why do we provide aid? Why does America provide aid? There is always this sense of suspicion because of a hidden agenda. We as NGOs, including the UN, really did not help. Interestingly, by going underground, which we did, especially in this crisis, under the guise of we are providing assistance through partnership with national NGOs, an issue that I will pick up on later, we actually opened the gates for more suspicion. We did not invest at all in explaining why we are providing this aid. The simplicity of the message of the humanitarian imperative as a right seems to have eluded us. And I was really amazed when I asked NGO workers and UN, so for example, and why are you providing aid in Buner or in Swat, where the research was? Immediately I would get our vulnerability analysis said 2.5% of expressed that they needed that's why we're providing aid. And I would say, yes, why? Why do the vulnerability analysis? Oh, that's a tool that we had developed. And yeah, why did you develop the tool? I'm really serious, and perhaps it's a simple message, but it is a fundamental message. And one of the focus group discussions was with entrepreneurs. Swat in particular, more than Buner, is a very entrepreneurial district. Most of the inhabitants are entrepreneurs, especially that it was a very tourist population. And one of them said, well, if you were in trouble and a complete stranger came to offer you food, your first question would be, what's the catch? You know the ad on TV, what's the catch? It's free. What's the catch? There is this sense somehow that communities think differently. We all think the same, huh? What is the catch? In a global context that is extremely dichotomized, that people are already suspicious, the first question is, what is the catch? We did not help in first delineating that this is the humanitarian imperative and that it is a right. And I think the message that came across very, very, very strongly is that we need as a community to invest in clarifying that humanitarian assistance is a right and it is based on universal humanitarian principles. And that actually, the idea that humanitarian assistance is a right is not very alien to communities there. When we spoke to different people, people would take me to the side and say, well, yeah, we'll accept assistance from you, you're Muslim like us. And I think the underlying message was not because I was Muslim like them, because the discourse they're building, I am Muslim like them on, is built on they have a right as Muslim to this assistance, which is something they don't feel, I think, or it is not particularly felt with the global humanitarian assistance. It is not localized and owned as a value, as the fundamental value of, yes, this is a right. This is not charity, and this is not, necessarily politicized, which we did not invest at all in doing that, except for two organizations, and they are namely Médecins Sans Frontières and the Red Cross. Interestingly, people could name these particular organizations and say, yes, we know them, and we know that at least they adhere to these principles. Whether they believe that these organizations adhere to these principles or not are a different matter. But there was a sense of that they provided humanitarian assistance based on a set of principles and a set of values that made them more acceptable, irrespective of their belonging. Obviously, it is a Muslim community, and we can identify, I know that the cross is not particularly a Muslim symbol, but it still was accepted within the community because there was investment, because there was a message out there of why they are providing this humanitarian assistance. Most other NGOs completely disappeared, went underground, and in this context, NGOs, America, and the government are interchangeable very easily. This differed by social belonging, social strata, I don't know what, age and education. Interestingly enough, age, that the middle-aged and kind of in their 50s and I think it has to do with the history of this particular area, were more accepting of the idea of an international value system than the younger generation, which I think were more indoctrinated in more conservative and fundamentalist leaning. I must say that also these particular two organizations were identified by some members who we were told were also kind of from the Taliban. So there was, what I'm saying, I guess, is that there was an acknowledgement of the universal values. Is that we were not really doing our job in advertising and advocating and upholding these universal values and making them really clear. The other is about international, that the whole international seemed to mean, so NGOs are international, are Western, all interchangeable. The last time I checked, I thought I was international. I'm British now, but I'm originally from Egypt. I thought Egypt was international, and obviously not. Even within NGO workers, international somehow meant Western, and we need to reclaim and redefine international to mean truly universal. If we are speaking about an international project, it needs to be owned. Obviously, this attitude towards NGOs is very contradictory. So on the one hand, NGOs are a sinful word, but in the same sentence and from the same group and same community, we'd rather have NGOs actually handle the process of humanitarian delivery than the government, because the government was perceived to be extremely partial. So we were not, it's a very complicated context where NGOs, there is a love-hate relationship between NGOs. There is a huge information deficit, which frankly, we're not helping either by the way we're providing assistance. And it is a global context where it is extremely politicized, extremely dichotomized. I don't really need to get into it. And there are very interesting quotes in the report just showing this contradiction in, yes, we love NGOs, no, we hate NGOs. And it's interesting, especially about the multi-mandated NGOs. I was speaking to a group of women, and I asked them about the cash they get. And I very cautiously, because I was very aware of the sensitivities, I asked one of the women, but wouldn't you rather get the cash yourself? Because, you know, if it's given to the husband, you know, he has the decision-making power. The animosity, there was always iron curtain coming down. No, don't mess with the women and gender relations. No, we're very happy for our husbands to take the money. Thank you very much. You NGOs, come here. You want to destroy our cultures. Immediately, she kind of softened a bit when she realized I was actually Muslim, and like, oh, okay, so why do you want to ask about gender relations then? So there is also a lot of challenges here, especially around the multi-mandated organizations. Interestingly, all respondents across age, social group, categorically said yes, they would provide humanitarian assistance if America was in the same situation or if Britain was in the same situation, which for me was very moving and very powerful. There is a universal sense of the humanitarian project that does bind us, but this is really fragile, and we need to invest more in strengthening it, because that is how the humanitarian system would really be more effective and would really, really work. And it is a simple message, but I think it is a very powerful message. All of them said, yes, if it were America in the same situation, we would give. And everyone said, human being to human being. A categorical message, and I found this very powerful. In terms of the actual delivery, identifying and meeting the needs was a challenge. And it's a challenge we're experiencing now during the flood response. Registration process was a real challenge. I can answer a question around registration process, but one of the challenges for us as humanitarians is that in this situation, I think we all went with some kind of an assumption at who the communities are, who are the most in need, and for example, what are the patterns of displacement? So with these communities, most of the displaced actually chose to either put all their savings into renting rooms or to go to host families. These were not even on the radar as IDPs. They were not considered as IDPs, and they were so not alienated, but far away from the humanitarian machine. The posters and this pattern of displacement, they do not go to camps. Well, they do, but the majority choose not to, for a variety of reasons. They fell through the net. Also, who are the communities? So, for example, we did target the yes, what we considered as the poorest. But there is a whole social strata who actually provided the safety net for a lot because of the pattern of extended families and the sense of responsibility in the community. There were families who actually had other families. So you'll find a family that had another 10 families, for example. And I saw this, I visited these houses. In the house, but because they're not poor, they're not the real community. They fell through the net. I remember I was with a donor once, and he looked at me and said, but honestly, you're not really a real Egyptian. And I said, how many cuts do I need in my dress to be a real Egyptian? So there is a whole social group that actually, whose resources were depleted and who actually provided assistance that we were supposed to provide, and they were completely missed. Also, the uniform package of assistance. So, for example, food, beyond the first 3 days, everyone said we did not need food. And I come from a very similar culture. We don't feel that we own food. So food is the least thing that my neighbor will need. Even now, me living in London, I'm providing food to my neighbor. Food is the least thing they need. Beyond the first 3-4 days, the community will provide food. But people needed more cash, but also needed a kind of assistance that would almost ignite the economic cycle of a very entrepreneurial, and it's not really entrepreneurial as in that they are businessmen as such, but there is a sense of entrepreneurship, and they needed investment of this small enterprise to keep the economy going. The sense of dependence that this particular pattern created. So, for example, people decided, rightly so, I would decide exactly the same if I were them, that it is much more profitable, it makes more economic sense to queue all day for food, because people would pay others to queue for them 300 rupees and give them another 300 rupees, which is more than they would earn doing whatever work they do. And we created this. I know I don't have time. I still have accountability and partnership, but I will end on also, this is about, in the humanitarian project, we speak a lot about community resilience. And we seem to have an extremist view of what community is. Community are either completely victims, helpless, or they know everything about everything. You know, and oh no, communities know everything, and really we need to invest in communities. We don't have a realistic, comprehensive, more nuanced, sophisticated view of what communities are. They're not the holy grail that know everything about everything. They do perpetuate the protection issues. Communities have issues, and they do have hierarchies, and these are perpetuated. Communities are not the holy grail. They're not these romanticized vision. Also, they are not the helpless victims that we have a romanticized vision about, and I can speak to that more later. Accountability to affected populations also was a challenge. We all in the human respondents seem to agree that accountability was important, but we were not very sure how to do it or what does it mean exactly. Also, practices of accountability were quite challenging for communities, amongst communities, in contexts where issues of accountability in themselves are problematic. Communities themselves found that accountability mechanisms can be very destabilizing and subversive to the community's sense of hierarchy itself, which was one of the main challenges around accountability. And finally, again, partnership with national NGOs. Again, partnership with national NGOs was perceived to be important for a very, again, mechanical, because it is more effective, because we reach more people. And frankly, if national NGOs do not own the project, which most of them, they don't, it is something that is perceived to be mechanical out there. The humanitarian machine comes in there, goes in, clusters come in, and at the level of the discourse of partnership, we seem to have reduced partnership to attending cluster meetings or subcontracting national NGOs, rather than a true sense of ownership of this project. What is that project that we own and that needs to be owned nationally, locally, and internationally to mean everything? So yeah, I rushed through and probably need an oxygen mask now, so I'll shut up at this point, but we'll probably pick up in the discussion. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Amany. Okay, you've raised some